to another episode of Cap and Gown. I'm Rachel Phillips-Buck, VP for Student Success, joined today by our president, Matt Boisvert. Hey, Matt.
Hi, Rachel.
Hey.
I have, well, my video feed is, I could hear in the background the sound of Hurricane Melissa as I was watching that come through. And I was like, why does it sound so windy? Because it's super windy if you're in Jamaica.
It's so awful. We started watching that this morning and it's just incredible, the power of that storm. So for sure, thinking about that. This is the last week of October, which means Halloween is on Friday. And interestingly enough, my daughter doesn't have school on that day, which I think is going to ramp up her Halloween costume preparations. You know, it's not like go to school and then be done. It's like all day you can get ready to be. She's a flapper this year.
Oh, that's fun.
It's very fun. She was like, we're dressing up like we're from the 70s. And I was like, you are? What are you? And she's like, a flapper. And I was like, no, I was alive in the 70s. So that was not. And then she was like, no, she was like, and then for Spirit Day, we are dressing up like we're from the 80s. And I think I'm just going to wear bell bottoms. And I was like, honey, we're going to have to do a fashion by eras, you know? Anyway, November is soon, and I wanted to tell you, you know, we're always talking about rhythm of the academic year.
Yeah.
In fact, Megan and Stephanie, who are joining us today, are like, we're in the thick of it, which is, of course, because everybody's doing registration and academic advising, and the theme for November is stress, just to make that very clear. Mostly students are thinking about like midterm grades and they're having all their roommate problems now and they're getting excited about Thanksgiving and going home, but also that's a little bit stressful. And so just as you're in your registration meetings, make sure you're asking about all of those things because that's kind of what's on their mind right now. Anything else you'd like to add, Matt, before we jump into State of the Union?
Well, I think I'm kind of related to the start of November is fall back. So November 2nd, Rachel, you get to change your clock. Well, you get to not change your clock, pretend like it's, 8 o'clock and actually 7.
You and I have worked together for like 18 years, and there are very few subjects that we just have to agree not to talk about. And the time change is one of them because you do it wrong. You think about it wrong. And I think and we always have conflict.
Of course you think that way.
Yeah, of course. All right. That brings us to the State of the Union. Well, there's a lot going on in the state of this union, Matt. And I'm afraid this is not a cheery report today. You know, I try to usually like find some very good things. I maybe have one or two, but there's a lot of crazy town business going on right now. So let's talk about it. First of all, ACT, SAT participation remains below pre-pandemic levels. Nobody is surprised about this. 1.38 million students took the ACT in 2025 compared to 1.78 million in 2019. 2 million students took the SAT this year versus 2.2 million in 2019. And SAT scores only increased slightly from the high school class of 2024 to the class of 2025. ACT scores about the same, but both of those are below pre-pandemic levels. So I would just say like the theme of State of the Union right now is just there's a lot of troubling things going on in higher education that I think, I'm always talking about like transformational leadership in higher education, which is where you can't just keep doing what you've done before because like things are changing substantially. And I think that's the theme of our State of the Union today. So another thing that's happening is, the number of visas for international students has been decreased quite a bit. There's a really interesting article in The Guardian about how we think about that oftentimes for our larger schools, that have a high population of international students. But actually, a lot of our smaller schools have international students as well. So this year, there are about 150 fewer international students studying at our colleges and universities compared to
50,000.
yeah, 150,000, which is about a 40% drop. So, in some cases, like if you think about the contributions to the overall economy from our international college students, it's about $50 billion. And then for smaller towns, it's even more significant. So pretty
Yeah.
interesting there.
And as we were talking about this, one thing that came to my mind, so we had the pleasure of spending time with Dr. Matthew Little, who's at the University of Tennessee Southern in Pulaski, Tennessee. And their international population has become a very important part, not only of their campus, but the small town of Pulaski. And so just hearing him, and his wife is leading all of the work to integrate international students into the community to make sure that they have the resources that they need. What's interesting about that is then thinking on this small town and the influence. And you were saying earlier today, just if you think about it, when a traditional domestic student on holidays they're going home, but for most international students, they can't go home until a big break. And so there are these periods of time during the semester where most of the students will leave. That would be an economic kind of drop for that smaller town. But the international population stays there, and there's an opportunity to keep them
And
engaged. Right?
there's a lot of things about our international students. They're not always full pay students. So sometimes you're giving scholarships to those students. Sometimes they're coming to play athletics even in a small school. So not just Division I school. So it's just a really interesting piece of the ecosystem of a smaller town, a smaller university. And I would be really curious to hear on the institutions, that we serve and that listen to us, how that's made an impact on their campus community. So another thing I want to bring up is that we've just had sort of a round of Title III cancellations, which are closing a lot of TRIO programs. It's about
So, yeah, look, we have schools where like 8 professionals who were engaging students for student success are no longer able to be employed by the institution because this funding was taken away.
yeah.
And I mean, you think
So
about that.
it's about 120 programs,
TRIO
which, to
program.
be clear, is only 3%. So it's not a gigantic portion of TRIO programs, but it's about 43,000 students. And the programs that got canceled, that really is coming from a place where when they made their application to get a Title III grant, they had some sort of demographic characteristic in there. So, for example, they wanted to serve men more than women, or they wanted to serve a minority versus their majority ethnicity on their campus. And it doesn't feel like those were canceled with any sort of nuance to them. It was basically like, we're going to review those applications, and if that's in there, we're going to cancel it. So I don't know how long lasting that's going to be. I don't know if they're going to come back and have a little bit more finesse as they're deciding who should get that money back. But for sure, we have schools that have done a great job in their TRIO programs, and then to have this cut means they're not going to be able to support their students in the same way that they have been successful doing.
Yeah, one of the schools I'm thinking about just achieved the highest retention rate they have ever had, a historic retention rate, and then this was taken away. So hopefully there's a period. I kind of feel like it's kind of like corporations using AI to just like filter out candidates for jobs.
Yeah.
In this case, they just went through all the TRIO applications and just flagged anything that had certain keywords without any real understanding of who that institution is, what their mission is, the population they're serving, and all of that. And so hopefully there will be an opportunity for that institution. In fact, I need to talk to one of my friends who's at one of those schools and just find out like what is the recourse? Is there an opportunity to just kind of rewrite it and not get dinged?
Yeah.
the way that
So it's unlikely any more cuts are going to come this year because if you didn't get canceled, your TRIO program has already gotten your funds. So I think that's what we're going to see for this year. But hopefully there is a way for them to come back and either reapply or change their application to fit better.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a fun one. This is coming out of, I love the Indiana University Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning. And they just did an exercise with faculty and students where they said, build what you think each other's daily schedule looks like. So write down what you think is happening. So what I think is interesting about this is faculty were most recently students. So they have a little bit of context for what a student's day looks like. Although I would be very interested to have them write out what a student athlete's schedule looks like, because we know that is
Sure. Sure.
or even a non-traditional student. I think that would be really, really interesting to do that comparison. But what I like about this is that students were like, my faculty member teaches a class and then goes home, basically. And their understanding of office hours was out of 40 hours of free time that a faculty member has, they schedule 2 hours because they don't want to spend time with us, right? They have all of this time, but they don't want to spend time with us. And then when faculty were like, no, we're teaching, but then we have these faculty meetings, and then we're going to these lunch and learns so that we can be better teachers. And then we have this research, all of that kind of stuff. It actually changed students' perspectives. So they were like, thank you so much in this very busy schedule for coming up with these 2 or 3 hours where you're going to be in your office where you can visit with us. So changed it from them they were trying to avoid students to being like, oh, you're actually really making time for us. Thank you for that. So I think that's pretty entertaining. I would do that in a class if I had one. Just be like, what do you think my day is? Yeah. Okay. These next three, I think, go together. So, we've been talking about the enrollment cliff, which is a real thing. Everybody should be making plans for how they're going to adapt to that. Who are you going to enroll? We've talked a lot about non-traditional students as a big population to serve. We've talked about how there are tons of students who have some college credits, but they haven't graduated yet. That's an opportunity to serve. This article out of Inside Higher Ed is saying actually one of the multipliers of the enrollment cliff is actually high school readiness. So are they coming academically prepared to college? College freshmen are less prepared than they were last year, 5 years ago, 30 years ago. Last year's high school seniors scored the lowest in reading on the National Assessment of Education Progress since the assessment was started in 1992. Only 22% of 12th graders performed at the proficient level in math last year, which is the lowest level since the test started in 2005. And the average ACT score has been dropping down to 19.4 in 2024. So all of these factors then narrows even further the number of students that we have that we can recruit to college. Or you can recruit them. It just means that you have to have all of this scaffolding set up to be able to coach them up. And so I think that's going to be really stressful. Matt, I think I told you I read a dissertation the other day about the psychological effect on students where their first, let's say, 3 classes in college gain them no credit. So if they have these sort of remedial courses and they're like, I took a whole semester and I literally don't have any credit, it's very, very hard to overcome how that makes a student feel like they're not making forward progress, because let's be honest, they're not making forward progress in terms of their ability to graduate. So I think that's a really interesting idea. What are we going to do with these lower academically prepared students, right?
So, Rachel, I've just been harping on the need for a bridge program. Every institution, especially for smaller institutions that aren't that struggle every year with hitting their enrollment goals, those who are going to be most affected by this enrollment cliff, and now academic preparedness drop.
Yeah. So oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you're not intentionally building a bridge program between high schools in your area or places where you have a strong alumni base, and working with different schools, obviously, in your area, but also there are private institutions that you could build bridges with. If you're not doing that, then you are setting yourself up for a drop in enrollment and quite a surprise.
Yeah, so the Lumina Foundation also has an article about how America is slipping in higher education. The slide starts long before college. The National Assessment of Education Progress released its 2024 results. In 8th grade, 1 in 3 students now performs below the basic level in reading. And this is just a widespread difficulty with our schools, our K-12 schools. So
Yeah.
while the United States spends more money per student in higher education and education in general, our college completion rates are very low, stubbornly low, one might say. And trying to figure out not only how you bridge the gap to get students into college, but Matt, how you work with those K-12 schools to get students leveled up so they can actually be successful in college. There's also an article in Newsweek called Americans' Faith in Higher Education Declines Further, which is all about this survey about 3,500 adults, where a lot of the people surveyed said, higher education system is going in the wrong direction. And that was regardless of your political affiliation. So for both sides, those that have that view has gone up by 10% since 2020. And it's just, so you have this combination, right? You have all of these things together where we're cutting student success programs, and also we're not doing a good job in K-12. And also we have an enrollment cliff, and people are like, yeah, I don't know that higher education is doing a great job, which is why I keep talking about transformation. Like we have to have a different view for how we do college for our students. So
Yep.
Anything to add to that one?
No.
Okay. All right. The last article I want to highlight comes out of the New York Times, actually. And I think this is really interesting. It's about embedded therapists in college dorms and academic programs. So this article is all about how sort of mental health difficulties don't happen between 9 and 5 when traditional counseling centers are there. So a lot of these schools are embedding a counselor in res halls, and they have after hours appointments where you can do drop-ins or you can make an appointment. You're in your res hall. What I think is so interesting about this, Matt, is yes, it's very helpful for students. So when we talk about 37% of our college students are grappling with depression or anxiety and stress and those sorts of things, clearly it makes sense for us to have embedded counselors. But here's what I think is so interesting. The biggest effect they've seen is on resident advisors, which makes so much sense, right? Because RAs are the ones who are there after hours when students are freaking out about things. Sure. And they feel burnt out and overwhelmed because they're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do for this. So schools that embed counselors, they have RAs who sign up over and over and over again. Their mental health is better. They're more able to invest in their residents in general because they're not always putting out fires and being really reactive. I think it's such a smart idea.
Yeah, so I think you kind of laid out the why that helps with your Res Life program and your RAs are more engaged. But if we just think about, we've talked about timing with a lot of our services, right? So when is a student more likely to need different services? And the idea of trying to fit it into a 8 or 9 to 5 slot, it just doesn't make sense because that's not a student's life. And this is a great example of that. As you're talking about that, I'm thinking about our friends at Timely Care and like how that provides a resource. But there is something valuable about a person in your res hall. They're accessible, a person who can look at you face to face when you're in the middle of what feels like a crisis, right?
For sure. I mean, just being able to handle things like panic attacks, right, which are going to happen in the evenings when you're thinking about your homework or you're feeling overwhelmed. Yeah. I just think it's such a good idea. And one of the things that's really nice is there's not a good substitute for being in the same time, in the same place, in the same room. So if you have to do things like online counseling, I think that makes sense. It's better than not. But there is something about wandering past the door and being like, hey, can I just talk to you really quick? I'm feeling overwhelmed. So I really love it. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say, like, especially when you think about, the rhythm of the academic year, and as we think about moving from October into November and all of the challenges that students have, like you were saying, like when we're thinking about this time, so maybe it's not all the time that we have this available, but there are for sure times in the semester, now being one of them, especially thinking about roommate conflict and all the anxiety and all the projects. You go, to your grandmother's, or you go home for Thanksgiving, but you can only enjoy that day for like half the day because all your projects are due, right? Like this is the weekend where you have to like pour into all that work. So now might be a really valuable time to invest in your team, your counselors being available outside of the kind of traditional 8 to 5.
Yeah, and not having to walk to see them would be really nice. Although I will tell you, as an LPC, I'm not doing that because I don't know how you have boundaries. I really don't. Like if you're there all the time, it would be very, very difficult. So I think you'd have to figure out, right, how to have like busy seasons and then times where you have some respite.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
For both sides, having like that is resource loading it at the right time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so sure. I think you have to be smart like that.
Yeah. Although I don't know, Matt, there's some questions about that, things like confidentiality and like you see me in there with this student, and I think there's probably some things you got to work out. Maybe it's better to not have counselors and just have people like who are good at that and hanging out, apart from RAs. So I'll have to do a little more research about how that actually works on a campus. All right. That is our State of the Union. So, Matt, thank you so much for joining me for that. Appreciate it. You guys.
I'm envious because, I love my friends at University of Pikeville. In fact, for taste, I had my little book back here. This
what is
50 more places to fly fish just for taste.
Oh, all right. Nobody knows who Taste is. You're going to have to tell them.
Well, I mean, he's at University of Pikeville. I think he's been promoted. He's now VP of Student Development, I think. And more importantly, every time I get to see him, we're always talking about fly fishing. And his latest is using beads, which he has educated me on. So.
Trying to convince you, yeah. All right. Well, you'll just have to listen to our conversation with Megan and Stephanie. So thanks for joining me. All right. I'm going to welcome Megan Childress, who's the Assistant Dean of Student Success at Pikeville. Good to see you. And then we also have Stephanie Stiltner, who is the Director of Family and New Student Connections. Hey, Stephanie. I'm so glad for you guys to join us. I was telling you earlier that Callie, one of our employees, listened to your workshop at ACA and was like, texted me in the middle of your presentation and was like, we have to have them on Cap and Gown. And I was like, yes, ma'am, we will do it immediately. So here you are. So thank you so much for agreeing to join me. I want to open this conversation. Can you guys give us some context, not only about your school, but also about its location and the students that you have, and maybe just like your perspective in general on student success?
Sure. So at the University of Pikeville, we are in Eastern Kentucky. So we tell students, we tell families, you can kind of drive in any direction and be in Kentucky, Virginia, Tennessee, West Virginia. So we're right in the corner. So we are a smaller school. We've got, this year we have just over 330 new freshmen. Total enrollment is a little over 1,100 for undergraduate students. But we also, we've got a medical school, optometry school. We're onboarding a dental school. So there's a lot going on here. But we, of course, are in the Division of Student Success. So I oversee we have 6 different offices that are kind of student success, student support. We have an ACE program, which is actually our TRIO program. So both of us were actually like furiously taking notes throughout the State of the Union, ideas and things to share out. And so our TRIO program on campus is ACE. We serve up to 165 students in that program.
Wow.
We have our Center for Student Success, which is our professional advising for first-year students, transfer students. And that's where I got my start. I started out as a student success advisor, became director, now assistant dean. We have Center for Academic Excellence, which is our tutoring center. And then I like to tell people all the time that Stephanie's a great example of, she does such a great job that she's just collecting offices now. So I'll let her, she's doing so well. We just keep giving her offices. So I'll let her talk about what those are.
Yeah, so currently I oversee Family and New Student Connections, which includes Family Connections. And then we grew into UPike First, which is our first year experience. And then most recently we've added second year experience to those. And I'm sure we'll talk about how that evolved and why that makes sense to lump all those together as transition programs.
Yeah, great. I'm excited about that. I think that's a conversation a lot of schools can benefit from hearing, like, this is why that makes sense. So can you tell us just a little bit about your student population? Like, what are the things, as you think about risk factors for your students, what are the things that you see bubbling up, maybe different than other schools in other places?
I think because of our location and because of where we're situated, we do have a unique kind of student identity. We have a high population of first generation students. We have a lot who are Pell eligible. We have a lot who are here because they're student athletes. We're open enrollment. And of course, that's a unique situation also. Tace, who Matt was talking about, he's my supervisor. And he would say that we're a school of opportunity. So we do have students who come in. When I train advisors, I always tell them that one of the most difficult parts of it is that when you may have a meeting with a student right now who was a 32 ACT, came to our very first orientation session of the summer, does everything exactly when you ask them to do it, they're following everything by the book. And then 30 minutes from now, you may meet with a student who is here on an athletic scholarship, who genuinely had no idea that college was even an option for them until 5 months before. And so, you touched on college readiness and math and reading and things like that. And you have to be able to serve both of those students and anyone in between. And so really, I think that's the heart of who we are and what we do in student success. I think for us, for a school of our size, the amount of support services that we have and the staff that we have is incredible. It's one of those situations where for students, if they need support, it's there. It's just getting them to it.
Yeah.
It's not whether or not we have it. It's getting them to use those services.
Which is so interesting. I know that that's true about you guys, that you really do have a unique perspective on these are the students that we have. And so we just have to figure out what is that kind of scaffolding that they need, which I think so many schools could benefit from. Matt and I always have this conversation with schools where they're like, we want different students. And we're like, too bad. You know what I mean? Like, you have the students that you have. And so what you have to do is become an expert in how to provide support for those students, instead of saying, but we want easier students, or we want students who are more academically qualified. You have the students that you have, and you've got to become an expert in that. So Stephanie, I know that you spent a long time in public affairs before you started this work. And I'm just really curious how that background has shaped your approach to building connections, not just with families, but also with students. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. You're aging me the way you said long there, Rachel. Yes, I was also born in the 70s, so we'll just throw that out there. So all of that work, my backgrounds are my degrees are in communication, my background was in public affairs. So all of that public information and all of that communication and event planning and organization and just making sure that you're giving a clear message to the right audience at the right time.
Mm.
That's communication 101, right? And so now when I got to switch over to the student success side, I'm able to do that for targeted audiences, starting with families, right? So we talk about FERPA, that often comes up in family conversations, as it should, but I never share anything with families that even remotely relates to FERPA. My background's public relations. I share information that is on the website. I share who you need to talk to for answer this question is this person or this email, that sort of thing. So really, I'm just kind of customer service is really the biggest approach from that, and that just setting those expectations and keeping them informed, empowered. If they know what's going on and what to expect, they can better support their student. Because families, especially first gen families, when students come home and say, I don't know what this email meant, or I got to sign here and click here, what does that mean? When I have sent families information a few weeks before and said, okay, your student will expect this email, this is the time of the semester where you need to register, file the FAFSA, whatever that is, they feel empowered, like, okay, let's pull that up and we can go through this together.
Yeah. It's such a good point. I think I was just reading something the other day about these students tend to be more successful when they have that parental support. And you guys know the conversation not too long ago was like, keep parents at an arm's length. They shouldn't be involved. We're talking about adults, all of that kind of stuff. And I don't know when it happened, right? Where all of a sudden we're like, actually, if they have family support, they're going to do much better at this institution, which I really love. I was thinking the other day about, anytime you have your kids who are involved in something where you don't have the expertise to make a path for them. So whatever that might be, where you're like my daughter likes to play athletics. She's in athletics, and I did not do any of that. So she'll come home and be like, yeah, can you sign up for snacks? And I'm like, should I bake a cake? And I have to talk to Z, who did athletics, and she's like, Little Debbie oatmeal cakes, Rachel. And I'm like, oh, okay, thank you so much. But anytime you have that experience, right, where you're like, I literally have no idea what the next best thing is or how to guide you or what that means, just having that kind of communication is so powerful for families. So I love that you guys have that position.
We've absolutely done that with Megan's a new soccer mom. I'm a volleyball mom. Sure. I don't know how to do anything except I can manage a concession stand. That's about my expertise, and I stay out of the way for other things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just helpful to have those wise people. What Rachel Elam actually said to me was like, please don't make this hard. They don't need like a creme brulee. They go to the store and buy Capri Suns, right? And just get the oatmeal cakes. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so I do want to talk about your first year experience. You have so many, what I would consider to be best practices, really well thought out practices in terms of who your professors are, how you manage that with cohorts, even how you've transitioned that into now second year programs. So can you help us understand, when we say first year experience on your campus, how did you come up with this intentional design, and what are those really helpful elements of it?
Do you want to start? Because it's evolved and it's always evolving. So if you want to pre-game how we are now.
Sure. So I guess some historical context. When I was an advisor and we were in kind of the in-between where we didn't have a director yet and wasn't open yet, I wasn't sure if I wanted to apply yet, things like that, I was kind of serving as interim. And so one of the things that Tace, Dr. Meyer, did was when they restructured our division, it was all of these kind of previously disjointed support services on campus. And, I'm over here an advisor in Center for Student Success, and I'm in this building. And then we've got the ACE program over in this building. We've got tutoring center, over here. And then there's other people that we may not be talking to on a regular basis. And so that really unified everything. And not just unified, we were having monthly meetings and we were sharing out, because it's kind of like you were talking about, build each other's daily schedule. Then it became like, what are we all doing on a daily basis? Right. And we don't know, we're all in different buildings and we're all in our own little bubble doing what we do. And so originally first year, we had Center for Student Success. And at the time that was grant funded. It was a Title III grant. It was all focused on first year support. And so one of the things that became really clear with that was we really needed to have intentional first year experience program. And we'd had first year seminar that was called different things. And at one point it was in academics, and then it was in student affairs, and then it came to student success. And it was, like this person was a faculty member that got a stipend, but they were under student success. It was everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it started out very different. And then, like we said earlier, Stephanie was just doing so well. She's just collecting offices. So she's up, she's with us at this point. I become director, she's director, doing family connections. And it felt like a natural shift into if Stephanie is already working with families, onboarding them, right? Why wouldn't she also be involved in onboarding their students so that, there's that direct connection? She's up with the advisors in the office near ACE with all of these people. So it was kind of this natural, and it was also natural with second year, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but it really became, I know that's a long history lesson, but it was, everything was everywhere. And then it was very clear that that's not best practice. And that's not the people that are going to be talking day in and day out. And so, she's taken it and formalized it and made it intentional and made it consistent. And, I'll let her speak on how she did that. But from where we were in 2014 when I started and where we are now, it's like two different worlds in a group.
So Stephanie, I do want you to talk about the specific pieces, but I just want to point out what you're saying. I always laugh about our students and this mindset that often exists on a campus, which is like, that's not mine. You do that. No, I don't know about that. What about that? Right. And if you said to students, like, you woke up in res life and then you went to the cafeteria and that's a different thing. And then you went to your classes and that's academics. And then you went to tutoring, but that's they would be like, I don't know what you're talking about because that was seamless for me, right? I just went from one thing to the next. And so this reimagining that you guys have done really is student-centric, where you can't say to a student, that's not us, go to that building. No, that's not me. I know I'm talking to your mom, but I don't know what's happening over. You have to really make that cohesive and say, we are not going to have these silos of information. We are going to have the student in the middle, and then we're going to do all of this work to support them in just a very comprehensive, collaborative way, because it doesn't make sense to a student to do it anyway else, right? It doesn't make sense to them for you to be like, I don't know about that. They're like, don't you work here? So, okay, Stephanie, tell us a little bit about kind of the specific details of your FYE.
I think it starts with our summer orientation program. We're bears, so we growl. So we gather for registration, orientation, welcome, and leadership. Our president rebranded that soon after he came here. So we have growl summer orientation sessions that we partner with admissions, right? So admissions gets them in the door, but student success, we are right there with them all along the way. So they bring them in and then we take them out, right? So, and we have a great onboarding team. Our growl/bear pause team. So bear pause is our clearance process. Like, you have to pause before you go through the process. I know it's funny.
Nice, I love it.
It's a bad papaw joke, but they laugh at us.
We love a pun.
They laughed us out of their feeling sorry for us, I guess. So we have those references. So we have a good team there that's involved with admissions, international student offices, residence life, business office, financial aid, registrar's office, that sort of thing. And we meet year round. We meet all year round, because at some point we're in a cycle of summer registration or spring registration or debriefing for what worked and didn't work.
We have like a 3-week break in September.
Yeah,
and then we're back at it.
Yeah.
You're like,
yeah. Back at it tomorrow. We have a meeting tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that growl is the big handoff. And then we have the traditional UPike first week, which is the 5 days and nights of activities, that there's the rah-rah events and the nice fun things where you learn the alma mater and you find your classes, all that stuff, and you take care of some business. And then everyone takes the first year seminar class, right? So those things are very standard practice. But what we have evolved, some things that we found that work for us, is we have standardized curriculum. So we have an FS instructor team. We have, like I said, 18 sections in person and 1 online, but we have 25 instructors. And those instructors, some of them, if you do the math, there's some co-instructor models because it's involved with faculty and staff. We have diverse people across campus. We have people from public safety, people from athletics, people from student success, of course. We have people from our professional schools now. We have staff from our College of Osteopathic Medicine and our College of Optometry that wanted to come in. They're not as familiar with our undergraduate processes, so we paired them with an instructor from the undergraduate side. So we have faculty, staff, like I said, from different colleges, a nursing office assistant, and they're just run the gamut, right? And so that team is added to that team, our first year success leaders. So there's the embedded peer mentors, and we put a lot of weight on them in there. So they are not exactly teaching assistants, but they're heavily involved. Like, they're strict. They're more strict than we are. Like, we've had to tell them, like, it's okay. You don't have to count off 10% because we're 2 days late. It's an FS class and they had to write a journal entry. It's okay.
We had one
Yeah.
that she's phenomenal anyway, but she was frustrated with the amount of missing assignments that were in there. And so she sits and hand writes out every missing assignment for every student to like give them a piece of paper. She laminates it, right? Gives it to the student, and she's like, and if they throw it away, I have another one, and pulls up. So she's like, big copies, right? So she's in there and she's ready. She's like, they are not going to fail on my watch, you know.
That's
so she's
incredible.
They are just as involved, if not more.
They are, but she's actually in my class. Not that we talked about the pairing of instructors and students, but I actually get to work with her. But two of the students were in their mandatory study hall for their sport that are in my class, and they had some missing assignments, and they text their first year success leader, said, hey, we're over here in the Center for Academic Excellence working our stuff. Can you come over here and grade it as we do it?
Oh, wow.
And by no means did I mean for her to go and do that, but she said, okay. So she went over, spent an hour with them and helped them make sure they got all their assignments uploaded and what they needed, and kind of just that emotional support success leader right there with them. So,
okay, sorry, I want to interrupt you there because I want to ask you a question about that. I'm always talking to schools about the way that you explain what the job is. Right. So if we explain the job of like a peer mentor as you have to make sure they come to class and you have to make sure they have no missing assignments. That's one thing. If you explain it in terms of you are responsible to help these students be successful. So yes, those things are like an element there, but like you said, like we have emotional support and you have to ask how they're doing and that sort of thing. Those two peer leaders are going to show up in that classroom in two completely different ways. So I'm just curious for you guys, how do you, like, what is the language or what is the training that you're giving your peer leaders to say, it's not this one, it's you're responsible to help these students be successful in any way that you can. How do you explain that to them so that they get it?
Well, it's different because, like I said, I have 25 instructors and I have, how many do I have? 12 success leaders, right? And all these different sections. They have standard curriculum, right? And we'll talk about the timing of that with their partnerships with key people on campus. They're going to teach it different. You've got the content, so each instructor can teach it differently. I view things from a communication lens. That's my background. That's my field of study. You know, another person in our office, our assistant director, is a psychology background and therapist background. So she does that counseling kind of approach. Our chaplain, I mean, I can go on and on. So they have the content and they deliver it in their way. And the same with their first year success leaders. They deliver the content and the information and the support in their different ways. Some are more engaged than others. That's just how it is, right? And some of them, because we do it through campus employment. So they're doing this on top of their classes, their other work study, because some of them have multiple positions, because this one isn't as intensive hours wise. Yeah. They're student athletes, they've got everything else going on. So it varies. And so we tell them to bring your personality in, you know, and they're just involved in different levels. But they've surprised me with how much they've given it and how much attention and how they know the students. The students will text them, like, if they don't tell me they're missing class, they'll tell the success leader, sorry, I'm missing class because something happened, or I'm out of town for athletic travel, whatever. So they're communicating with them a lot, but the success leader is setting their own expectations based on their personality and experience. So
Yeah.
if I've got 40 people in FS classrooms, it's all going to be different. And so we just kind of let them do what's comfortable with them. We don't try to put that square peg in that round hole, right? We give them that openness to do as they approach.
It's interesting too, because, you know, all of those different approaches are going to resonate with different students. So there's going to be students who are just missing that in other relationships. And then they're like, oh, what you're doing makes sense for me. That's what I need in my relationship constellation. So I love that. Okay, keep going. Keep telling me about FYE.
Well, the one thing I want to kick back on what Megan said, not kick back, that sounds like I'm going against you. Let me go back to what, I'm not going against you. Go back to what Megan said of our population. We will have students who are like, I didn't think I was going to college until I got a scholarship last week, you know, and I'm here, I'm moving in, I just learned this, here's my family, and, you know, we're here, right? And so those last students that come in, and then we also have the people who are ready, they're on the fast track to go into our scholars program for the College of Optometry or College of Medicine. So they have a plan and they know. And these students are in the same classrooms for FS 102. We got a mix of everything. So not the cohorts, there's not cohorts themselves as far as who is in the room.
Except for one. So
I
will add, we tried 1 year to do cohort based by program. And that for us was not ideal. Because we have our professional programs, our medical programs, we have a lot of students that come in and they're like, I want to be a biology major or biomedical sciences or chemistry, things like that. And it's not always the right fit. And what would happen is students would be in that section of FS, change their major, but then that cohort is so focused on that they then kind of feel a little isolated after that change happens. And so we moved away from that. So the only one that we still have is actually for our ACE students, those TRIO students. And it's because it gives them extra support. It's taught by folks from TRIO. So it's actually giving them extra face time with that group of students. And that does work incredibly well, but it has nothing to do with our program, anything like that. So if they change a major, change an advisor, change whatever, that doesn't change for them. So that's the only cohort that we have currently that we've really seen a lot of success with.
Yeah, I love that so much. We're always talking about anchor points. And so what happens if you're anchored to your major and that's the same as your first year experience, then when you unanchor from your major, you also lose that anchor to FYE. So if you can make those two places, like you're anchored to your major and you may change that, but then also you have this other thing that keeps you engaged. I think that's really smart. Okay. So I want you to talk a little bit more about FYE, and also if you, at the end of that piece, if you'll talk some about the do's and don'ts, kind of the things that you've learned as you've been building that iterative program, that would be great. But keep going, Stephanie.
We talk about the intentional design and strategic partnerships. That has been absolutely key because we're giving them the information they need to act on at that time. Because we could easily tell them during summer orientation, which starts as early as May before they even come to class, oh, when it comes time for FAFSA, you have to click here and do this. Or when you finally get access to your student planning, you'll have to go in and click this on page 3 and tab 4, all that sort of thing. So we give them that broad overview during the summer, of course. And of course, it's in guides and everything, we have it. But we are in the classroom. The academic advisors are in the classroom. Our business office and financial aid staff are in the classroom when it's time to go in and accept your aid. Go in and look if there's any holds on your account. They have a worksheet they fill out with them. She's assistant vice president for business affairs, and she goes into every FS classroom, and our director of financial aid. They give up that week and a half's time to go in every single section and talk to students, and they take those worksheets back. She not only gets the worksheets, she grades them almost, like to make sure, like, did they understand what their balance was? Did they see that this truly is that? And we return it back to the student. So there's no surprises, right? She also uses that whenever families call and say, my student didn't know they had to accept this aid, or they didn't know. And she's like, well, I was in their classroom on this day.
Yeah.
And so they do know. They may not be aware of that's what we were talking about that day, but I promise you, we're telling your student what they need to know when they need to know it.
I love
and
that.
That is strategically timed She went in 2 weeks ago when they did that to clear their accounts, make sure their holds are off. They didn't have any parking tickets that were preventing them from registering. And then Megan and her team came in just last week to talk about student planning. So they were cleared. So anything they need to do, those turn points, we call them speed bumps that you might get hiccups over and just can't go past. We brought them in the room. They tell them to bring their devices. We have extra laptops. Like, truly, come in here in the room. It's a lot of workshops. And so we show them as they go through. And one thing with their business office, they have seen, we've seen registration holds cleared off a lot faster as our freshmen, as they go on. We're teaching them the first time, and they have to do it, how to do it. And then it's just trickled down and been tremendous. She says it's well worth her time to come and invest that week and a half every fall to do that, because it saves so much on the end. And we're empowering them.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah.
I'll add the advising component to that, where we're teaching them to use self-service. As the professional advising team, we get a year with them, right? And then after that, they're going to transition to a faculty advisor that's in their program. And faculty advisors have different styles. They have different expectations. You may have an advisor that wants to sit down with you for an hour every single time you register, you go through your plan, and you're on track to graduate. And then you may have one that says, you need to come in here and tell me what it is you want me to register you for. Yeah. But they can also register themselves after that year. So, if we as advisors and from a student success perspective, it's our job to teach them to use these resources so that regardless of who their new advisor is or what their hold is or how many parking tickets they get or whatever, that they know not only where to go to access that information, but what to do with it.
Yeah.
So that's been huge. Students are coming in for registration this week, and they've got their classes planned, and they want to talk about it, and they want feedback on it, and it's so involved, and it's all about taking ownership of their education and their journey.
Yeah. It's such a good example of teaching them to fish, which I really love. And it's also such a great example of upstream thinking, where it's like you can keep meeting with students who don't understand what you need them to do. Or you can be like, we're going to just stop right now and we're going to spend the time to make sure we teach you what you need to do. And then you're set up for success for the rest of the time. So I just think it's so smart. Do you have any do's or don'ts in terms of kind of that iterative process?
Well, we have a few. We've got a lot. We've done this for a while, so we do have a few. As far as advising, is that what we're talking about, or
as a whole?
Sorry, for some reason I can't hear you guys. I don't know what just happened.
The screen blacked for a second. Can you hear us now?
Bailey is checking on it.
Okay.
I could just let you keep going, but unfortunately, I want to hear what you have to say. She's about to tell me if it's just me or if it's everybody. It's just me. Okay, well, I don't know how to have a conversation if I can't hear what they say. The good news is everyone else can hear you.
Okay.
Say again. Are you still on Wi-Fi? Yeah. Sorry, you guys. Aren't you glad we prepared you for this, that this might happen? Let me see if this will work. I'm going to switch. Okay, can you say something?
Hello? Yeah.
No, I cannot. So if you'll just turn up your volume. Okay, Bailey fortunately is sitting right next to me, and she's going to turn her volume up very loud. Okay, tell me about your do's and don'ts.
Okay. We talk about our FS instructor team, our instructors that are in the FS sections, and then we have the first year success leaders. We match them, and I think that has been helpful. We based them on personality, interest, major, and that works out really well. When you have kind of your wingman there in the class, they pick up where each other leave off, right? And so we make sure we help them develop those relationships. They meet in the spring before they start in the fall semester. Mm-hmm. They exchange phone numbers. We get them back together during first week so they can touch base. So they're not walking in the classroom as strangers in front of the room. They're a unified front and finishing each other's sentences together. And that's been absolutely wonderful. But something else that's wonderful in partnership with Megan's departments and my departments is that our advisors, we're so close and we know each other and we know all the FS instructors, the advisors know them, that as advisors get to know students during their orientation process and making their class schedules, they can say, oh, you're really interested in blank. You would be a great fit for such and such as classroom, whether they're matching them to the instructor or the success leader. Because sometimes you're like, you may not have a match with the exact instructor and the times you have available, but you will be great because she's also a student athlete, or they're also really passionate about service learning, whatever that is. So we not only match the instructors and the success leaders, we also match the students the best we can with their instructor team. So I think that helps a whole lot.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'll add a don't because Stephanie and I work really well together, and we're kind of polar opposites in a way that like it works. Thank goodness. Yeah. But I'm very protective of Stephanie, and I'm very protective of what we've built together as a division, as our students and our staff. And I think there's a real tendency to take an orientation or a first year seminar course or whatever first year experience programming, and like everybody's like, let's put it in there, right? And so then it becomes grandma's attic, and you kind of lose focus of what it is and what it's supposed to be, and you're missing things that should be there because you're focused on this other stuff. So when folks approach you and they're like, I've got this cool thing and I want you to put it in your first year seminar course, we really step back and say, is that where that belongs? Like, is that actually the best place to deliver that? Is that the best timing to deliver that? Are students ready to receive that in that way? And thankfully, because of the work that has happened over the last couple of years, we're in a really solid place with the first year seminar course, with orientation. And so then when people approach us on campus and they're like, I have this thing, we can really and truly look at like, what are we hoping to accomplish in each of those areas? And is that the best? Is that where that fits?
Well, something else to add, because of the unique, I am a unicorn, it's going through orientation through first year and second year experience is so far, don't challenge me, UPike people out there, but when they come and say this, I want this to be part of first year experience. Can you require them to do XYZ? And I was like, once we talk to them and figure out what their need is, I can say, you will be better suited during growl. You will be better suited in second year experience because I can give you this more time, and this is their mindset then, and they're not just checking a box for you. So yeah. We have options. So it's kind of a la carte. They don't even know what those options are until we tell them. And so far it's always worked out that's worked for them as well.
I love that so much because I have this in my real life. I know you guys too, where I'm like, how am I supposed to get this thing done? And someone's like, I told you that 6 weeks ago. And I'm like, I wasn't listening 6 weeks ago, right? There were other things going on. I had other priorities. I have no idea. So this right at the right time, delivering it when they can hear it, when it feels urgent to them, I think is such an important part, not just for freshmen, but for all of us, for somebody to say like, at the right time, I'm going to tell you how to do this thing. Because if I tell you earlier, you're not going to remember it. It's not going to mean anything to you. Okay, we don't have very much time left, but I do want you to talk about this decision that you made to then sort of extend this through to the sophomore year for students. Can you help us understand like what was the impetus for that? How did that happen? And what does that look like?
Very much like the same thing that happened with first year. What we were seeing though, this was a bit more data driven. What was happening was we had Center for Student Success. We had the start of the FYE program, the formal version of it at that point. And what we saw was that as first year retention rose, we hit a record high retention rate for first year students this year. But we were seeing that rise but then the sophomore year was going down. So it was like in first year they were getting all this personalized attention. They had their professional advisor. They had their first year seminar instructor and their leader. They had all of the support team that was like, we're here and we're ready. And then they moved on to sophomore year, and it wasn't necessarily that those things weren't available, because we were all still available, but we weren't in their face as much. Yeah, and so we looked at the retention and we were like, okay, that's not going to work. And so that again, we had someone that was there in a kind of a stipended position, and I think they did like a retreat.
Yeah. For a select group of
and there were like
leaders.
There was an activity here and there, but we were like, that's not enough, right? So again, Stephanie's doing such a great job. And so we're like, who better than Stephanie Stillner?
Yeah.
And so
Thank you for that.
Again, just a natural, it's all about that progression and the transition, not just to college, but from one year to the next.
And second year experience in higher education, I can't speak on it historically, but from what I've seen, it's not as new. I mean, it's newer than, it's not as established as first year experience. So every college kind of does it a little differently. Mm-hmm. So anytime when I hear a college, especially somebody like us that's got second year experience, I'm like, how do you do it? Because it's very custom, right? Some of them have been grant-based, and it's for a select group of students, and some of them have been leadership-based. But our approach is we wanted to celebrate all second-year students. So we have traditions on campus. So our landmark is our 99 steps. So we're on a hill. We're in Central Appalachia. The buildings were up there before there were elevators, that sort of thing. Those 99 steps were the only way to upper campus. So as freshmen, our students climb those together during our first week. Families come. It's a big rah-rah event. They get the little first year pin, said, UPike first year. And then they, just before graduation, the day before graduation, when they graduate 4 years later, they go down those steps and they get their alumni pin. So I get chills every time I think about it. I can't help it. They go up as freshmen, they come down as classmates. So in the middle of that, right, that's kind of far away, right? Mm-hmm. So in the middle, we decided, a second year experience, we host a halfway to graduation celebration every spring. So in the middle of those, their academic journey, we identify the students who have reach that number of credit hours, whatever that math is, right? We figure out those students and we invite them and their families to campus. We'd have just a little celebration in our central campus, the plaza, just right adjacent to the 99, and they get their second year pin. So you're seeing students around campus with those on their backpacks, their first year pin and then their second year pin. So I think that and we introduced that transition during Growl. Mm-hmm. So we talk about that. This is the beginning, this is the end, this is the middle. So we're going to get you there all along the way. But our second year experience programming is basically for small group. We have our Center for Student Engagement they have the concerts and they have the block parties and they have all these events for all of campus. We are trying to establish connections and belonging and help you find your people, right? So I have a team of second year success leaders that host small group events. They'll work with the faculty and say, hey, Dr. Hess, can we meet Tuesday after class? I've got 10 people from your biology class or chemistry class that want to know more. Let's just go over and we host coffee with them. Or we have lunch with another professor, or we do a paint and sip with somebody else. So they find their people and whatever those interest things are. They've done things like build Legos, mm-hmm. but they've made these small cohorts that you don't necessarily get in other ways, right? Because we're feeling it's a little small gap, but it's still a gap, because we've got commuter students and residential and athletes and non-athletes, all those kind of around. But they're making those connections with hobbies and fun stuff connected to their faculty, and they see them outside the classroom in a different way, just humanizing them and making them more approachable and relatable.
It's so good. I'm reminded of the book, The Art of Community, which you guys have taken all of those things about rituals and symbols and language and spaces, and here's how we say, and talking about the future, right? All of those things are ways that you say, we have this community and you're part of it, and here's that journey that we are going to forecast for you and then walk alongside with you as you're successful there. Okay, I have one last question for you, and that is, every campus is different. every campus has different students and they're in a different location and they have different needs and different things going on. But can you talk about, just in general, your philosophy as you have built all of these different things for students? How are you thinking about those things that might be transferable to another institution, even if they're wildly different than you? Can you just help us with that?
I think for me, I think the first step is always listening. I think it's you need to be in touch with who your students are, whether it's at a school like ours, whether it's a much larger university or a school that's not open enrollment, or whatever that looks like. If you aren't listening to the students and what the students have to say, I don't know how you advocate. For us, and we talked about, like, we have the growl committee and the bear paws committee and things like that. When we've listened, it's helped us identify those barriers, those speed bumps that are causing issues for students. And when you're student centric, obviously you want to remove those barriers, or at least figure out how to help them through them. So for me, it's listen and advocate. If there's a process that isn't working for a large group of students, maybe we need to figure out what that is, and how do we do that different, and how do we hopefully eliminate the barrier, or at least make it easier, or educate them on how to go through that. And just meeting students where they are. I think you have to figure out what students need. The students of this year, I feel like every year each cohort of students has their own personality, their own quirks, their own interests, their own whatever. But if I sat here and said that the students that were here when I came to work here in 2014 were exactly the same as the students from this year, that's not true. But if I still pretend like they're the same, then that's a disservice. And so, I think you have to listen, and you have to advocate, and you have to look at what those barriers are, and use, if you're collecting data and you're not doing anything with it, that's also a disservice. So we use the CSI, we have surveys that we take during growl, we have different things, and it's like, if I'm going to ask you to fill out a survey, it's because I want to do something with that information. And so sharing that out with campus partners who need to get that data and need to do something with that data, I'm going to send that all day and say, like, it's not something I need to hold on to myself, and it's not something I have to figure out myself. I want to work together. I want to work in a committee. I want to work in a group and talk through, how do we help? How do we do something different? How do we do something better? Because we can always do something better.
Yeah, Stephanie, I'm going to ask you to respond to. I just want to say about that, it's like we were talking about before, like, my students should be able to, but if a large portion of them can't, you're not allowed to say, well, they should learn it. You have to then figure out, what are we going to do in order to make a way for them to be successful? And that idea of I don't know what's wrong with them, but they can't, right? Versus this idea of, well, if they can't, then that's a gap that we're going to have to figure out how to bridge so that they can be successful. I actually think is a different attitude than exists a lot of times in some offices, right? In some offices, it's like, I don't know what's wrong with them. They never whatever. And you're like, if they never whatever, we've got to figure out what to do about that. Stephanie, what's your reflection?
I obviously back up everything that Megan says, but communication is key. Communication with your students, and then obviously communication with your peers on campus and different offices and things like that. So offices don't know what they can't fix. If there is a problem that the accessibility or whatever that is, we've got to make sure that we give them a chance to fix it, right? So communication is there, but also customer service. And customer service, I think part of that is setting expectations. When people know what to expect, they're empowered. You know what's going on, and so we end I think I am most meetings, and every growl session we end with what's next, right? That's a West Wing reference that I love. I have to throw that out there. That's my favorite show ever. But what's next? You're always like, okay, I've done this far, and then what happens now? So you know what's going on, and you're not hit by surprises. Same with families, like you said, if they know what to do, you're empowered, or at least know how to find out that next information. So just setting expectations and empowering them with that information. Simple as that. It's not simple, but
it's so good. Sorry, but that is really refreshing to me, because I think sometimes in our institutions, customer service feels like a dirty word. It feels like a thing that we shouldn't be talking about. We shouldn't be aspiring to. We shouldn't be trying to figure out how to do that really well. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that, some of which I understand. But I also think the freedom that institutions have had maybe historically to be like, I don't have to serve my customer. I'm going to set up what works for my office and for me and for my schedule, and they're just going to have to figure it out. We don't have that kind of freedom anymore. Like, when you think about all of the stuff we talked about in the State of the Union, students are going to choose schools and stay at schools and graduate from schools who understand the importance of customer service and feel like they're important and like you're committed to helping me be successful. So I just think it's so refreshing to be able to talk about that, because oftentimes people are like, don't say that word. And I'm like, those words. And I'm like, we have to make that a norm. I think especially for smaller revenue, like tuition-based campuses, we just have to start talking about that. So you guys, thank you so much for joining me. I think we probably could extend this conversation for several hours, so I may invite you back so we can talk more about all of the great things you're doing. But I just, I always reflect after I have guests, like, would I want my daughter to go to that school or would I not? And so I'll send her to you guys. You can help her out. We have some time, so don't worry about it. But thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. For all of our listeners, we're not going to be back next week. I will be at CIC in Indianapolis. So if you're going to be there, come and see me. That will be really fun. And then the week after that, we're going to have Dr. Sherry Woosley on to talk about whatever our hearts desire. So join us then. You guys, thank you so much for joining. Bye.
Thank you.